In the heart of this nation, under skies so blue, there's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true. From the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are diving straight into a story that's, well, it's fascinating and it's still developing.
Yeah.
It's about the journalist, Olivia Nuzzi, and her recent run-ins with some pretty big conservative figures.
You could say that again?
We've been digging through a whole pile of reports, opinions, all that good stuff.
Really trying to get to the bottom of this one.
So you guys listening can really wrap your heads around what's been going on.
Exactly. It's a lot to unpack. We're talking about Olivia Nuzzi, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Candace Owens.
Donald Trump, even.
Yeah. The goal for you today is to go beyond just the headlines you know.
Right.
To really figure out what's at stake here.
Yeah. What are the different sides of the story?
What's this whole thing tell us about the media these days?
Yeah, and how political reporting works. So let's jump right in.
Right into the deep end.
Okay, first up, Olivia Nuzzi's profile of RFK Jr., who was published in New York Magazine back in November 2023.
Oh, yeah, I remember when that one came. He was running for president at the time, right?
As an independent, yeah. And the reaction was,
Let's just say it got people talking. The way she wrote about him, it was pretty unflattering. And Nuzzi, she doesn't pull any punches, does she?
not really, no.
That whole Franken-candidate label she used?
Stuck with him.
Definitely. Makes you wonder about how much power a journalist has with a well-placed phrase.
Yeah, and how politicians have to think about their image all the time.
It's a delicate balance, objective reporting versus making a strong point.
Right.
A point that then becomes part of the whole political conversation.
And it wasn't just the overall tone of the piece. It was those details, those almost unbelievable moments she described.
The Death Machine minivan.
Riding with RFK Jr. in that minivan.
Yeah.
And the distinct smell.
The aroma.
Right. No wonder Kennedy's team wasn't thrilled. They called it a hit piece.
Of course they did. I mean, those little details, even if they're subjective.
Sensory stuff.
Yeah, they can really paint a picture in the reader's mind.
Right. For better or worse. And we have to mention, Kennedy's team made a point of saying he only sat down with Nuzzi once for that whole profile.
So they felt like she didn't get the full picture.
Exactly. And that maybe she spun it a certain way because of that limited access.
So it becomes a question of how much can a journalist really understand someone?
From just one meeting.
Yeah, from just snippets of time. And how easily those snapshots can be seen as biased.
But this is where things get really interesting. September 2024 rolls around, and suddenly,
oh boy,
Nuzzi is part of the story, not just covering it. News comes out that she's been talking to RFK Jr. personally.
Hold on. After the profile was published.
After.
Sure.
And she admitted that some of their exchanges got, well...
personal. That's what they always say.
Right. Personal, but not physical, she clarified.
Okay, but still. Big no-no in journalism.
Right, exactly. It raises questions about whether she's too close to her subject.
Conflict of interest, all that.
Exactly. And New York Magazine, they put her on leave, launch all these investigations.
To see if she let her personal feelings influence her reporting?
Internal, external reviews, the whole 9 yards. And here's the kicker.
What?
Both reviews concluded there were no inaccuracies, no evidence of bias in her work.
So her reporting was solid, factually.
Apparently. But the appearance of impropriety.
Just the fact that she was chatting with him.
Was enough to raise red flags. It shows you how much journalists are under a microscope,
Yeah, every little thing they do can blow up. And it doesn't even have to be actual wrongdoing, just the perception.
Right, that's enough to damage their reputation. So,
Yeah.
October 2024.
Things go from bad to worse.
New York Magazine and Newsy, they split up. Officially due to that conflict of interest violation.
I remember that. Made headlines everywhere, didn't it?
Yeah, Politico, NPR, Vanity Fair even pointed out this, feeding frenzy around Newsy.
Everybody scrutinizing her work, her life, everything.
Right. And here's the thing. RFK Jr., he didn't face nearly the same level of scrutiny.
Interesting. So the focus shifted entirely to her. And naturally,
Kennedy's team seized the opportunity.
They used it to bash her original profile, saying it was biased from the start.
Because of this personal connection?
I mean, think about it. This whole thing shows how easily a journalist's private life can be.
Weaponized.
Yeah, especially in the world of politics and media. Everything's so charged.
And it can overshadow the actual work they do.
It raises a big question,
Yeah.
How much separation do we expect between journalists and their subjects?
In their personal lives, even.
Even. It's almost like we're asking them to be,
Like monks.
yeah, totally detached. But is that even possible?
Okay, so let's talk about another big piece of this whole mess.
There's more.
Oh, yeah. Late 2024, early 2025.
Okay.
Candace Owens enters the picture. She goes public with some pretty heavy accusations against Newsy.
She did.
She claimed Newsy was masterminding a hit piece aimed directly at her.
To ruin her reputation.
And she had what she said were leaked text messages to back it up.
Proof that Nuzzy was pulling the strings.
And she didn't hold back. On her podcast, social media, she talked about Nuzzy's digital affair with RFK Jr.
Bringing that back into the mix.
and directly accused Nuzzy of leading this campaign against her.
Wow, that's a lot to throw out there.
It is. And she went into detail, claiming Nuzzy was advising another writer on the piece.
On how to take Owens down.
Pushing for a clean shot, as Owens put it.
To really do damage.
And this was supposedly all happening while Owens was pregnant.
Adding another layer to it for sure.
Then, according to Owens, Nuzzy read an early draft and said it was too conspiratorial.
So she wanted a more factual, grounded approach, but still aimed at hurting Owens.
That's how Owens presented it. And she went public with all of this before the article could even come out.
Preemptive strike. It's important to note, though.
Yeah.
All these accusations, those text messages.
It's all coming from Owens and her people.
Right. Unlike with RFK Jr., there's no actual published article from Nuzzy about Owens.
Right. Not from a major outlet anyway.
This whole thing is playing out mainly on Owens's platforms.
And the reaction from the conservative world was
Swift.
intense. They saw it as another example of journalists ganging up on conservatives.
Mike Cernovich, for example, he jumped on it big time.
Went after Nuzzy pretty hard.
It fed right into Owens's narrative that she's being unfairly targeted by the media.
And Nuzzy's past with RFK Jr., that didn't help her case.
Made it easier to dismiss anything she or anyone connected to her might say.
But here's something that's interesting.
What's that?
Nuzzy has said absolutely nothing publicly about any of this.
Not a word.
Silence can be pretty telling, though, right?
It can. Is she ignoring it because she sees it as baseless?
Or is there something more to it?
Either way, not saying anything, it becomes part of the story, too.
And the evidence Owens presented?
Those texts, the secondhand accounts.
It's all circumstantial?
Right. Nothing concrete linking Nuzzy directly to this alleged hit piece. But the damage was done. This whole episode shows how deeply polarized some conservatives are about Nuzzy.
It's gone beyond just disagreeing with her work.
And it shows how quickly these kinds of personal fights can blow up in the media.
Let's move on now to Nuzzy's interactions with Trump and some other conservatives.
Okay, so she's known for covering Trump pretty extensively.
Her 2024 New York Magazine cover story, The Afterlife of Donald Trump.
Interviewed him at Mar-a-Lago for that one.
Right? And it wasn't just about politics. She was trying to get inside his head, see what his life was like after leaving office.
And she made him seem...
Kind of human.
Yeah. The Washingtonian even said it was surprisingly humanizing.
His demeanor, his habits, just hanging out at Mar-a-Lago. But people had mixed feelings about that approach.
Some critics like, hey, portraying Trump in a normal light just normalizes his behavior.
Right.
Downplays all the bad stuff he's said and done.
The Intellectualist reported on some pretty strong criticism along those lines.
It's a tough line to walk.
You have to report on these controversial figures.
But you don't want to make them seem harmless.
Or legitimize their views, yeah.
Exactly.
And Nuzzy, she defended herself on X, formerly Twitter.
Yeah.
She said trying to understand Trump as a person, even if you disagree with him.
It's important for understanding his influence.
Basically, knowing your enemy.
Interesting take. And she included all these little details in her article.
The shape of his ear, for example.
Random, but it adds to that feeling of getting to know him on a personal level.
People reacted in all sorts of ways. Some praised her access and her writing.
Others were suspicious of her motives.
Aaron Rupar. He compared her portrayal of Trump to her earlier coverage of Biden.
Which he felt was much more critical.
And remember that piece she wrote in 2023 about Biden's declining health?
Yeah, Democrats weren't too happy about that one.
It shows she can draw fire from both sides.
Depending on who she's writing about.
But it's not all conflict with Newsy and conservatives.
Not all.
She actually has a pretty good relationship with Ann Coulter.
Ann Coulter. The firebrand right-wing pundit.
The one and only.
That's unexpected.
It has raised some eyebrows. There's that 2014 tweet where Nuzzi said she admired Coulter at CPAC.
People still talk about that one.
Colleagues have apparently called their friendship weird.
I can see why.
Nuzzi has even joked about worshiping Coulter.
Which you can imagine.
Didn't go over well online.
So this friendly dynamic, plus her interest in profiling figures on the far right.
It's led some people to question her judgment.
Defector called her a white supremacist whisperer for that.
They argued that by engaging with these extremists, she was giving them legitimacy.
They specifically pointed to her 2017 profile of Mike Cernovich,
Who was heavily involved in Pizzagate at the time.
a very harmful conspiracy theory.
Critics said giving him a platform in a mainstream publication was irresponsible.
So Nuzzi's goal might be to understand these figures and their influence.
But her approach has been controversial.
It's brought accusations of bias, even endorsement by association.
It's a tricky situation for any journalist.
Yeah.
Now let's hear more about Candace Owens' side of things.
Her YouTube commentary really digs into her perspective.
She goes back to the beginning, with Jessica Reed Krause, House and Habit, approaching another writer, Emily Hagan.
To work on that alleged hit piece about Owens.
Owens insists Nuzzi was more than aware of this. She says Nuzzi was running the show.
Wanted to make it a clean shot to take Owens down.
And Owens emphasizes again that this was while she was pregnant.
Making it even more malicious in her eyes.
Then she shows those leaked text messages between Krause and Hogan.
Which she interprets as clear evidence of Nuzzi's involvement.
Owens is obviously angry about this, sees it as a coordinated attack.
And then she brings up Nuzzi's move to Malibu.
And this supposed coincidence with Krause driving a car with a very specific license plate.
RFK, followed by numbers and the initials HH.
Owens thinks it's super suspicious, points to a continued close relationship between Nuzzi and RFK Jr.
And she even mentions rumors of sexual blackmail swirling around RFK Jr.
Implying Nuzzi might be connected to those. Well, Owens says she's going to keep investigating Nuzzi, even asks her viewers for information.
So it's become very personal.
She also talks about RFK Jr.'s recent focus on anti-Semitism as health crisis, his defense of Rabbi Schneerson.
She contrasts this with what she thinks his priorities should be. Vaccines, the CDC.
Then she brings up Dave Smith, who's been critical of RFK Jr.'s stance on Israel.
And his association with Rabbi Shmuley Boteach.
Smith even accused Boteach of some pretty serious things.
Blackmail, extortion.
And Owens points out that RFK Jr. defended Boteach against accusations of anti-Semitism.
Accusations that Owens herself had made.
It leads her to question who might have something on RFK Jr.
To explain his seemingly contradictory actions.
Then there's Jessica Reed Krause's statement on her Substack, where she steps back from the situation.
Expresses regrets, says things were misrepresented.
But Owens doesn't buy it. She accuses Krause of lying, being motivated by hidden agendas.
It's a pretty messy situation all around.
It really is. So, to recap, Olivia Nuzzi, a journalist known for her strong opinions,
finds herself at the center of this media storm.
With several high-profile conservatives, each with their own issues with her.
The different perspectives are fascinating. Nuzzi defends her work, her approach.
While Owens accuses her of unethical behavior, even malicious intent, it raises questions about media bias, journalistic ethics.
And the scrutiny that comes with covering controversial figures.
So, what does all this tell you about the state of political journalism today?
And the relationship between the media and those in power.
There's a lot to think about.
It is. The power of narratives, the role of personal connections.
And the challenge of figuring out what's true in a world full of information and strong opinions. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.
It's been a deep one.
You Democrats! Bloated bureaucrats! Like a New York sewer rat!